Please continue to enjoy your meals, and note, we would never leave you without your shot of coffee fuel for the afternoon. It'll be made available during the break after the Chancellor's address. So let me just tell you a little bit about our Chancellor. Chancellor DuBois has led the Virginia Community College system for 16 years. And I believe, Chancellor, that's one of the longest tenured system office leaders in the country. Okay. So we'll edit that out of the tape. During his tenure at the Virginia Community College system, the Chancellor has signed groundbreaking guaranteed transfer agreements with more than 24 public and private universities. We've become Virginia's leading provider of workforce development services and helped Virginia close headline-grabbing economic development deals. We've diversified community college funding sources, doubling foundation-led private fundraising, and have maintained a tuition rate that is 1/3 of the comparable rate of Virginia's universities. What else was accomplished? Once again, the Chancellor created a dynamic strategic planning task force that, working together, has come up with our current strategic plan, Complete 2021. And he is, even today, continuing to chart new territory into workforce development through the Fast Forward initiative. Without further ado, and here to share with you his State of the System address, our Chancellor, Dr. Glenn DuBois.
Let's hear it for the greatest Associate Vice Chancellor in the world, Dan the man here. So friends, I'd like to begin with kind of a big shout out to many of you who are attending this retreat really for the first time. That includes a good number of college board advisory members. They were with us yesterday for a separate meeting, and I'm really delighted that they're hanging out for this retreat. I also want to welcome our new presidents. That's been a big activity of mine the last two years. The presidential ranks of community colleges they're really undergoing a generational shift. It's happening across the country, and I can tell you it's certainly happening here in Virginia. So get this, among our 23 institutions, only 3 of them have the same president that they had 10 years ago. All the others have come since. If you're trying to think who they are, I'll give you the answer. One is John Downey, Blue Ridge. I like to tell a funny story about John. You know, he started his career in Boston, I think in the tutoring lab there. And they found out he was a Yankee fan, and he had to flee Boston. I kind of get that. The other is Frank Friedman, he's back home because they're going through a 10-year SACS accreditation visit, so it's all hands on deck for Piedmont. And then we have the dean, I guess, of the group now would be Bobby Sandel. Bobby, where are you? Now, for the new presidents, these veterans, they wanted me to remind you of a long tradition that we've had here, and that is the new presidents. You must buy them all a drink tonight at the bar. That's tradition. But really, I kind of look forward to seeing what these new presidents bring to the table. Many come from other states. They offer fresh perspectives and different ideas. You know, as a group, when I listen to what they talk about, these new presidents seem to be a little bit more focused on issues like equity and social justice. They seem to be pushing creativity when it comes to partnerships, developing workforce solutions. We need all that. Now, for those that have been with me, Van, unfortunately, it hasn't been 16 years, it's been 18 years. I know that disappoints a number of you, but I can tell you, though, I have more days behind me than I have in front of me. But for those that do know me, you know I like to I like to read history books, particularly American history. I usually carry one of those books with me wherever I go. And I'm reading a book that our faculty council chair, Charlie Errico. Charlie, where are you? Right there, Charlie. Charlie gave me a book to read called Profiles in Leadership. He actually, you autographed it for me too, Charlie. It's a collection of essays by leading historians who are trying to articulate, as the subtitle suggests, the elusive quality of greatness in leaders. Many of the essays in this book focus on US presidents. Why? Because they're relatively easy to study. There's copious amounts of information that's out there that you can go through. And the book's editor, another great storyteller, Walter Isaacson, he wrote something that really struck me. He wrote, "Our most influential presidents were not necessarily our smartest ones, but rather the wisest at the tricky art of balancing pragmatism, practice, and reality." So that balance really is our trick, right? That's where the sweet spot that we strive to arrive at. You know, we have to ask ourselves questions. When is it time to compromise? When do we stand firm? When do we try something new? When do we double down on something that we just know is right? I mention that because really those questions, what Isaacson calls the tricky balance, that's the leadership test that faces all of us. So Van said the theme for this conference, actually Van invented it at the end of our last year's conference, which was something about disruption. Van said next year it has to be about what if. And that's the theme that we selected to frame our conversations today and tomorrow. So let me offer a couple of what ifs to kind of just get us started. And to keep us balanced, I'm going to start with some hard ones, and then I'll segue into maybe some encouraging ones. But let's start with the tough ones. Number one, what if? What if our historic enrollment slide continues for another 5 years? In simple terms, our colleges collectively served 60,000 students last year than we did in 2011-12. We've declined ever since. It's the longest slide in our history. 60,000, it's a lot of folks. That's how many UVA and VCU served last year combined. So if our enrollment slide continues on its current pace for 5 more years, we're going to lose another 57,000. We will feel it across the system. Since 2012, maybe with one exception, every institution, including the system office, has gone through layoffs, some more than once. We have shed good jobs and we've lost good people. 2 years ago, when our college operations were really studied by JLARC, they pointed out that we had really no policy in place for examining college, what I call college sustainability. They made a fair point. Everything in our policy manual really spoke about when you open a college. There was nothing in there about when do you look at consolidation of some form. So in response, our board, under the leadership of Robin Solenberger, who was chair at the time, established criteria for evaluating colleges. And they proposed, they adopted thresholds. And if you trigger all of them, there were 4 of them, it puts the college into a detailed assessment. And that assessment looks at options. Chance to focus, turn around, or maybe a merger, or, worst case scenario, a closure. Now, Jim Schaefer's he's an expert in this now, because Eastern Shore went through this detailed assessment. So Jim, who's one of our new presidents, he was hired in part to implement a 3-year plan to turn things around, return the college to viability. He'll be the first to admit he and his team have their work certainly cut out for them. But Eastern Shore, my friends, won't be alone if our enrollment doesn't rebound. There are a handful of colleges, about 5 or 6, that could be facing the process that Eastern Shore had to go through. Number 2, what if? What if we're not as creative or as flexible as we think we are? I've been in this business for 40 years. We've always kind of described ourselves as responsive, flexible, really creative. What if 50 some odd years later that's no longer true? What if we're not actually offering the programs people really need and when they need them? What if there's nothing magical about the 16-week semester? What if there's no longer such a thing as a typical college student? Let me offer you a little side note on that last one. A typical college student. Our statewide foundation, under the great leadership of Jennifer Gentry, many years ago started a fellows program for second-year students who are really smart and have financial need. This scholarship, this fellowship program, supported by a very robust scholarship, is a very big deal. These high achievers get their tuition covered. They don't have to pay for books. They travel. Past years, they traveled to China, Canada. They meet a lot of interesting people. Academically speaking, they're bright. You know who they are because you nominated them. You talk about them in your Rotary meetings. You pick them to meet with legislators when you come to town. So of this year's 43 scholars, the fellows, half of them are first generation. A third are caring for kids or grandkids. Almost all of them work full-time or part-time. 1 in 5, military veteran, and 1 in 5 was born in some other country. So you tell me, what is so typical there? What if many of those 60,000 students were missing? What if they just kind of walked away because we really didn't quite understand the situation that they were dealing with? Community colleges were lean and hungry in our early days, ready to try just about anything to attract, to serve people. What if we can just find that spirit once again? And that leads me to my next what if. What if the question of equity becomes our focus, not just an aspiration, but our focus? Study after study confirms that students who both work and come from low-income families, their chances of success, of getting a credential, is a long shot, even if they're really smart. Georgetown University affirmed that with another report this summer, which they summarized this way. And when you listen to it, think about this. In short, in America, it's better to be born rich than smart. Wow. That is just terrible news for someone like me, being in this business for 40 years. Simply stated, poverty just puts an end to a lot of college dreams. So what if we can do something about that? What if? I've asked Paula Pando, she's also back home, relatively new president at Reynolds. She's home with another Sachs 10-year reaccreditation visit, so it's all hands on deck for her. But I asked her to lead a task force on these kinds of problems, these non-academic issues that are really taking students out left and right. The task force is called the Power of Possible, or I think they now Van call it P squared. And it's exactly the right time to focus on what our students are really facing. The challenge that they face outside of the classroom. National studies say 2 in 5 community college students are experiencing food insecurity, slightly more housing insecurity. How focused can you be if you don't know what couch you're going to be sleeping on next week or where your next full meal is going to come from? Yet the credential they pursue with us is their best chance. They have to disrupt the very cycles that rob them of success. Chev just ran some numbers. We had the great Peter Blake with us yesterday that demonstrate the challenge that's here. Nearly 17,000 college-going students used SNAP benefits a few years ago. 3 out of 4 of them are students. These challenges defy stereotype. They weigh down urban, suburban, rural students of every racial demographic. And when they force a student to quit, when they deny that person the credential that they really need, they dampen what we really offer. So what if we can support that student in ways that we're not supporting them now so they can get to the goal line, a post-secondary credential? My friends, I think we've realized we can't do it alone. We need partners. We need other agencies, other organizations, other community organizations, volunteers, to come onto our campuses and help us serve these students. This is really a passion for Paula and those that are working with her. So that brings me to what if number 4. What if we really embrace the part of our mission that says we give everyone the opportunity to succeed? Our chamber here in Virginia has a strategic plan called Blueprint 2025. It's the result of their work with more than 6,000 business leaders across the Commonwealth. Their top concern, their number one concern, developing talent. Developing talent. That answer would have been different 25 years ago. It would have been about tax policies, infrastructure issues like roads. But today, it is talent. It's the top concern. Make no mistake, the talent challenge and our enrollment challenge are intertwined. And our demographic trends, my friends, are working against that. Virginia's birth rate remains below the national average. It's declining just as fast. You'll see that in a big way on college campuses in 2026. Virginia is losing also the migration battle with other states. During the first decade of this century, when I got here, we annually picked up from other states 10, sometimes 20,000 degrees. I was one of them. I came to Virginia with a degree. Many of you did the same thing. That trend has turned 180 degrees since 2012. We've been losing that many people to other states every year since 2012. Hard to imagine. I say this because I think now is really the time to pivot our focus beyond the traditional college-age student. When we prioritize serving adults, we step into something new, a new dynamic. So how many people are we really talking about? If we limit the conversation to Virginians between the ages of 25 to 44 who have not earned a post-secondary credential, we're talking over 1 million people, 1.2 million people. That is more than 13 times the 90,000 Virginians who will graduate high school next year, more than 13 times. If that weren't enough, then look at the trending. Over the next decade, that high school range of 15 to 19 will really shrink. And the number of adults above the age of 25 will grow and grow and grow. we can't ignore that. In fact, I think it brings us to a great what-if opportunity. And that brings me to, my last what-if. Many of you have heard me talk about this before, but I think it just needs to be repeated because it's only becoming more important. What if there was a post-secondary credential in every Virginia home 10 years from now? There wouldn't be one household that someone didn't have a post-secondary credential. I'm avoiding the phrase college graduate because that's confusing. People hear college graduate, and you know what they think? Bachelor degrees. What I really mean is every post-secondary credential, from CDLs, CMAs, AWSs, to associate degrees. Across Virginia, we have to fill 1.5 million jobs. 2 out of 3 of those jobs will require a post-secondary credential. But most of those jobs will not require a bachelor's degree. And we know that success today requires someone from just being more than a hard worker. The workplace is too technical. The marketplace is too global. The odds are too daunting to seize opportunity with just a high school diploma. Now, this is interesting. Some communities, some regions here in the Commonwealth are getting a head start on this challenge of a post-secondary credential in every household. Take a guess. In Virginia, what region do you think is the most educated? Now, I know a lot of you said, oh, that's Northern Virginia, right? That's wrong. If we're only talking about bachelor degrees, it's Northern Virginia. But if we're talking about all post-secondary credentials on a per capita basis, a per household basis, you know who's leading the way? South Side. South Side. And I think part of the game changer there is the fast forward stuff. You know, in 3 years, we've helped about 18,000 adults get a credential and a good job. Completion rates are north of 90%. Incomes are going up 25 to 50%. And I'm pleased to tell rural Virginia that you're outpacing everyone else. Rural Horseshoe accounts for 25% of the Commonwealth's population, but accounts for 40% of the credentials earned through Fast Forward. So Southside, congratulations. We're going to follow your lead. And why not, right? Those credentials are getting good jobs. And incidentally, in the rural Virginia, their increases in income exceed the increases that we see in urban areas. So what if short-term credential training was the beginning for more of our students, especially those that are at risk? You know, we have a lot of people that struggle in a 2, 3, 4-year pathway, and they drop out. What if they're just in the wrong place? What if they could earn a credential first, gaining something of value in the job market, also gaining some confidence? And then what if we could reach out to them in a new life and ask them, what's next? What's next? We just passed out to your presidents this morning the contact information of all these Fast Forward graduates who have told us, the majority have told us, they're ready for something next. They want to come back, or they're open to the idea of coming back. Your presidents now have their names and their contact information. So Fast Forward has shown us what happens when people commit themselves to a program that really lasts weeks, not years. And we've spent the last year applying those lessons to a number of our career and technical programs that lead to high-demand careers. That was an important step one in the groundwork, laying the groundwork for G3, the plan that our governor will propose to the next General Assembly session. I can tell you, friends, we're having weekly conversations with the administration. We kind of think we know where this is going, but we don't really have all the details because I think they want to see what happens in the general election. What I can share with you, though, G3 will be a noble effort with money to reduce the cost of high-demand CTE pathways and to break those programs into stackable credentials to help individuals pursue them in an on and off again kind of a basis. Fast forward, G3 are important innovations toward making what we offer simply more available to the people that need our help. So sometimes I think, here's another what if I was thinking of just this morning. What if we kind of got out of the community college business and rather got into the business of helping our students get good jobs and getting good career pathways? You know, sometimes I think our tradition is kind of holding us back. Oh. I'm going over there. They got it. What if we got out of the community college business and all of the historical trappings, and we just simply got in the business of helping students get a good job, get in a good career? Mills Godwin, who's our founding governor, he created us by really pushing through a 1-penny sales tax. I told Major the other day, I'd love to get that penny back, Major. It would solve a lot of our financial problems. But this is what he said about community colleges back 50 some odd years ago. He said, they have taught us that we can never again think of a college education as something that belongs to the privileged or just the few. And he's right. If we can dedicate ourselves to seeing a post-secondary credential in every home, we will not simply make Virginia more economically competitive. We will not just give every family access to the type of careers that can sustain them. We might just solve the much larger problem of equity. My friends, what if we can do that? So, as I wrap up, I want to bring us back to that earlier reference that I made in the beginning, the tricky art of balancing pragmatism and principle. The focus of the book that Charlie gave me last month. The title of that book, Profiles in Leadership. There's an interesting early chapter that focuses on George Washington during the time that he was a general. 7 years fighting. The author, Thomas Fleming, makes an interesting point, and this is it. If we evaluate Washington like we evaluate professional athletes, we'd consider him a total failure. Why? 7 years of fighting the British, Washington won only 3 victories. One was a raid, one was just a large skirmish, and the other one, to the east of us, a siege at Yorktown. How long would a football coach in the NFL last if he only won 3 games in 7 years? He wouldn't last 7 years. Washington faced a long list of challenges. They almost sound comical. He could never, ever get enough money. I've heard that here. He could never get enough regular army soldiers. He had a hard time attracting and keeping ragtag militia. He had no real navy, Charlie. And the popularity of independence waxed and waned over 7 years. At times, he didn't even know if he had the country behind him. But his true genius, it seems, was managing those challenges and the battlefield defeats in a way that prevented them from overwhelming the whole. He remained focused on the ultimate goal, and he mastered really that tricky balance. So I tell that story because it's real easy for us to be consumed with some of our challenges: enrollment declines, layoffs, strained resources, campus safety threats. The list just goes on and on and on. However, there's enough daylight in our what-ifs, there's enough promise in our people, and there is more than enough potential in our mission to make that tricky balance really work, and to give Virginia the higher education workforce training it really needs for today and tomorrow. You know, when I mention the promise in our people, it really begins with the people in this room today. Because I have something Washington didn't have. There's a famous moment where Washington watched a bunch of militia members flee from battle without firing a shot, without making any effort. And he cried out, "Are these the men with which I am to defend America?" Well, I look across at all of you, and I see in this room, I see people that I get to advance our mission. So George, eat your heart out, because I got the team right here. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.
So please join me in thanking the Chancellor again for his leadership and vision in the direction of our community college. He's given us much to think about and has challenged us to make the most of the time that we have together at the retreat. So in terms of some logistics, before we hear from our keynote speaker, we'd like for you to take a brief